matter of one language to another. And translation is the whole, covers that whole area of moving from one area of life to another, or the expression of a truth on one level to another level. When I left my home the first time, I was 17 years old and was planning on a long trip to India. And my father, the first leg of this trip was going to be by local train. And my father took me in his car to the train station and took my backpack out of the back of the car, gave it to me, and there was silence, awkward silence. And my father said, "Don't forget to write to your mother." And then got in the car and left. So this was, for me, a good example of the inability of men of my father's generation and culture to translate emotion into speech. Obviously, my father was emotional and had some fear and concern and worry for me setting out on such a journey alone at that age. And he was obviously aware that he was going to miss me, and yet he was unable to express that verbally. He couldn't even ask me to write to him. This is, don't forget to write to your mother. That was the nearest that he could get to an overt expression of love and care. So the way that we express our feelings is probably the major work of translation that we all do in our life. And we vary in our proficiency at it, and again there are cultural factors involved as well as personal or individual factors. But to bring this perhaps even more closely at home or in a particular time and place we find ourselves right now, and that's how we translate our devotion to Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha into our daily life. This is a work of translation. That many people have a conviction in the truth of the Buddha's teaching, and yet find it very difficult to apply it consistently in their lives. And this is a challenge of translation, isn't it? And so we need to approach this from many angles and see how to improve our ability to translate, particularly those thoughts, emotions, beliefs, opinions, in a way which is most constructive and helpful. One more element to this is, again, in terms of how we propagate Buddhism or how we share it with others. So if we are translating our interest and commitment into our own practice, and we're starting to see some results, then how do we share that with others? How do we translate this inner peace and growing mindfulness and wisdom in such a way that we can inspire others. How do we translate that? So the Buddha, I think, was in so many ways, of course, a genius. Was a genius in translation and a genius in presenting the teachings. To repeat an example I was giving yesterday morning, in that often we can start to practice, study and practice, and our teachers and those around us can be quite impressed that we seem to have made some substantial improvements and changes in ourselves and in our practice. And yet when we go home and we meet family members, those that we're closest to, whether it be parents or spouses or children, they can't see anything at all. And in fact, they sometimes use it as a kind of a club to beat us with. You know, you've been meditating all this time and you're just the same as you always were. You know? This is probably productive of more cries of anguish from Buddhist practitioners than anything else. So why is that? You know, when those that are closest to us are least capable of seeing changes in ourselves. A common sense would say if it's your parents or your spouse, surely they, rather than anyone else, would notice this. But I think the reason it doesn't happen is because the brain is basically a lazy organ, and we're always looking for shortcuts, which in the technical language called heuristics, but we're also we sum up people, we judge them, we label them, and that just makes things sort of simpler. And this happens in families. And so when we have family members who think they know who we are, and they're very convinced of it in many cases, then they're unable to translate their feelings into, or to accommodate this new truth. So my example, this is of the Buddha himself. A year or so after his enlightenment, he decides to go back and visit his family and to try to teach and express his gratitude for his father by teaching him the Dhamma. He arrives in Kapilavatthu, of course, dressed more or less as I'm dressed, with a brown robe and a shaven head. Goes an arm's round. And whereas almost everyone that the Buddha has met so far is completely sort of blown away by his presence and his purity and his wisdom, his father feels outraged. And what's my son doing, walking like a beggar in the streets, shaven head and a shapeless robe, and he's betraying our whole lineage. And so the Buddha doesn't go and teach him the Dhamma at that point, because no matter how wise the Buddha could be and how articulate, he realizes that platform of trust and openness will not be there. And the king cannot see the Buddha. The king can only see his son. So the Buddha does something quite remarkable. He floats up into the air and he performs the most difficult of all psychic feats. So there is a kind of a hierarchy. There are sort of easy ones and difficult ones. And the most difficult one is for half of your body to blaze into flame and the other half to turn into water. And the Buddha performed this feat in the air in front of his father. And his father must have thought, yeah, that's not my son. And that was the movement. The king had to recognize, this is not my son. This is not the son I know. And from there, the king was able to teach his father and to take him to the first stage of enlightenment. And so when we are teaching, talking, and communicating, doesn't necessarily have to be like a Dhamma topic. Then it's not just a matter of our understanding and our logic and how articulate we are, but we have to create a situation, and we have to be able to create the trust that will enable communication to take place in order to translate something that we know into something that they know. So this is a translation from the truth of one person to the truth of another person. And this is a very important study. And how we Luang Por Cha, Ajahn Chah, he would often say things like to couples about to be married, the actual ceremony is not difficult, it's what happens after the ceremony. He'll say for those who are about to become monks, the ceremony of upasampada that's not the difficult thing. It's how you live afterwards, and the building of a Dhamma hall or a chedi is really not that difficult. It's looking after it afterwards. So here many similar kind of statements. But I think one of the most memorable was that, how to gain the right information, but do you know how to be right? So he knows how to become right. So you listen to teachings from the Buddha and from great teachers, and you absorb them and you reflect upon them, and so you translate them. You translate the teachings into your own knowledge and understanding. But he said that's not so difficult. The difficult is how to be right. What he means by that is how not to suffer through being right, or how not to identify with being right, or place all of your sense of self-respect on being right, or not attaching to being right so much that you feel outraged by people who were wrong. And you don't feel that people should adopt your view because you're right. Now, sometimes you hear people say, it's just so straightforward. I mean, it's just so obvious. I've told him 100 times, and he still doesn't get it. As if, how could this person be so stupid? So I had experience as a young senior monk, organizing projects in our monastery in northeast Thailand, and I would hire local people sometime to do some building work, for instance, and say, look, I want you to do this and do this and do this and do this. And do you understand? I say, yes. And then you go along in the evening, and they hadn't done it at all, or had done it in a completely different way. So I thought you said you understood. And he said, yes. And said, well, this isn't what I told you. Yes. And I realized that although it wasn't a problem of language as such, but what I really needed to do, and what I did subsequently, was saying, I want you to do this, this, and this. Can you please repeat to me what I've just asked you to do? And that's how you find whether someone has actually understood you, rather than feeling impelled to say yes because you're an authority figure and feeling afraid of saying no. And in so many cases where we feel frustrated, that something which is so clear and so obvious is so clear and so obvious to you, but not to them. And not to so hastily assume that it's that person's fault, and it's a fault of communication. So we're also communicating in many ways that we don't intend to communicate. And I think the whole idea of body language is now a familiar one for most of us, and some of the writers on this topic will say that 70% of or more of communication is through body language, facial expression, tone of voice, etc., as opposed to the content of our words. But we're not usually really conscious of that. And we're assuming that that person is focused on the content of our speech. So that when people have some resentment and they're unable to let go of that resentment, and they're simply getting by not exploding, and then they say, I felt so upset with that person, and I felt so angry, but I never said anything at all. I just kept my mouth shut, and I didn't express that. And yet at the same time, they're talking to somebody and they're like this, So it's leaking out. It's not coming out the mouth, but it's leaking out of the body. And this is an area in which we need to bring mindfulness to bear. And what we choose to translate from others' conduct and speech is also something that we need to be wary of, and not to be put too much confidence in. So this is the whole idea of this uncertainty principle, not the physics principle, but this being able to hold things without making a definite decision about them. I'd always thought this was a uniquely Buddhist approach, but surprisingly, it is to be found in the journals of the great English poet Keats. I don't know if any of you are familiar and lovers of the Romantic poets, but Keats talked about something called negative capability, and he considered it to be the defining feature of a great artist. That is, the ability to hold something without making a definite decision about it, and not rushing into this judgment if it is this or it isn't that. So most of us, we feel kind of oppressed and uncomfortable when something is unresolved. Come on, look, is it or isn't it? Let's thrash this out. Let's be clear about this, and don't feel you can really relax until you have a definite fix on this. What exactly is this? What's going on here? And the Buddha and Keats had some insight into this, but the Buddha is saying, no, some things you're just not yet mature enough, or you don't have enough information to make that kind of definite decision, and you don't have to. You can just hold it there. And to be able to hold something which is unresolved and unsure and uncertain without feeling uncomfortable or without feeling oppressed is a skill that we should really aspire to develop. So when we look at other people and when we look at ourselves, you can notice a difference, a very clear difference. Let's say in the case that we act perhaps in a not a very wise way, and we look back and we say, why did I do that? And you think, well, one thing was didn't get much sleep last night. I was very tired and worried, and so my mindfulness wasn't probably as sharp as it should have been. And then there was this going on or that going on, or I hadn't had my meal yet, or something like this. So when we look at our own conduct, it's quite wide-ranging, and we take into account context, the context of that behavior or that unwise behavior. But when we look at other people's behavior, somebody says something to us or does something that we find objectionable or even outrageous, we rarely, well, partly because we just don't have access to that information about whether or not they had a late night last night, or they have some problem with their child's not sleeping very well, or they're worried about somebody or something and it's below their best. We often don't have access to that. But rather than recognizing that we don't have all the information we probably need, we assume that when somebody behaves in that way, it's because of their personality. That's the judgment we make, isn't it? Well, yeah, what do you expect? He's like that, he's or she tends to be that way, So we have these shorthand caricatures, cartoons of people, and we assume that whereas our actions are conditioned by all kinds of external factors and context, other people's are not. So this is a mistake we make in our relations with others, and so this mener, this as we say in Thai, this maybe not perception is the skillful one. You say, well, it would seem, that way, but we don't really know, and so we're tentative about things. We don't have to be so sure about everything, and of course, over the past many years, there's been this emphasis on being self-confident and being just believe, this kind of idea. So this is the just as Buddhist principles kind of just intrude into Buddhist cultures, often without really realizing it. It's the same of all cultures, and so in the 17th century, 16th, 17th century, in the Reformation, the Protestant Reformation position to Catholicism in Europe was very. This is a very simple oversimplification, but the idea was that when Christianity was adopted by the Roman Emperor and by Constantine, and became the religion of the Roman Empire, then it had to deal with all the pre-existing religious traditions and in the Roman Empire, and it accommodated them too much. So to a Protestant eye, the worship of Mary is an adaptation to worship of the Mother in various Roman religions of the time, the idea of the Mass as eating the flesh of Jesus and drinking his blood is from various Dionysian sects. Worship of saints comes from worship of deities. So this is the Protestant take on Catholicism, that it lost its way by becoming a mass religion, and all kinds of new teachings became absorbed and became the orthodoxy. So the Protestant view is we have to get back to basics. So one of the Protestant idea of getting back to basics means that coming to the original teaching that salvation is through faith alone. It's not through acts. It's not through doing good deeds. That's irrelevant. It's just whether or not you believe in Jesus or not. That's the prime causal factor in life, your belief. And so this view you can find in Hollywood movies, you can find in popular books like The Secret, and all this kind of, it's out there, in the cloud, it's out there in this world. Just believe, and everything will be okay. Yeah. So as a Buddhist, what do we say? Well, we say, yes, belief has advantages and disadvantages. Belief focuses your mind. Belief energizes you, but at the same time, it very easily gives rise to fanaticism or superstition. So you should try to maximize the positive, the focus and the energization, and guard against the negatives of superstition and fanaticism. So Buddhism is kind of analytical, but that's not the poetic way. It's just believe. You can be whatever you want to be. I find this is to me is as strange that this kind of I said to him, well, what if you want to be the Prime Minister of Uzbekistan? It's just obvious there are so many things that you cannot be, even however much you want to. This is not like a very profound point, is it? When you have a strong faith in something and a strong belief that you can do something, then you're likely to be very resilient towards obstacles and difficulties. You're not going to be easily dissuaded. So it's very helpful in that way. Excuse me. But I really don't think that simply believing in something is as strong a causal factor as is sometimes proclaimed. But the other thing that we can really see, I think, even on the political level and the events of the past several years, is how much damage is done by people in positions of power who are overly confident, too much self-confidence. This like you could write a high school essay or a university essay, like too much confidence is more dangerous than too little confidence. And this idea, you just do something because you believe it's right, and then everything will sort of sort itself out. This on a worldly level, this is the thinking behind the invasion of Iraq, for instance, and so many areas of life. So as Buddhists, we're saying we don't want to be sort of cowering and don't dare to do anything because it might not be right. But this sense of you're holding that there. Yeah, this is how I see it right now, but I could be wrong. So from like in people coming from belief system religions assume that all religions are belief systems. They say, oh, you're a Buddhist, what do you believe in? Oh, you're a Buddhist, you believe in reincarnation. So they're looking for our kind of key beliefs that identify us as Buddhists. And we have to be careful not to fall into that trap or start to look at Buddha Dhamma through non-Buddhist eyes. And in Thailand, I see this a lot, and Thais tend to be complacent about this because it's a Thai pride that we were never a colony. We were never colonized like the other countries, so we've always maintained our freedom. But the non corporeal, the influence of ways of thinking and views and the translation of these into cultural forms has more or less gone under the radar. So you can say, well, build houses like people in the West build them and dress like them. But these are minor things. But many people look at Buddhism through non-Buddhist eyes. And as I say, seeing seeing Buddhism as a belief system, and it's to me it's quite clearly not a belief system. It is essentially an education system. So it's a whole different concept of what a religion is and could be. So rather than a religion based upon an acceptance of dogmas, Buddhism is giving us tools to educate our conduct, our speech, our emotions, our thoughts, every aspect of our life. And it's a holistic system. So in the case of belief in rebirth, you're a Buddhist, you believe in reincarnation, don't you? And so what do you say? Now, I would say that the most important thing that a Buddhist should acknowledge is whether or not you have memory of past lives. So if you don't, then the most important thing is to proclaim without a hint of shame, I don't know. So you're a Buddhist, you believe in rebirth, don't you? You say, well, first and foremost, I don't actually know, whether a rebirth exists. This is how you should start as a Buddhist. Yes, I believe, but I don't know. And this, for me, sums up Buddhist wisdom, because in so many religious traditions, there is a confusion between the meaning of belief and the meaning of knowing. So people say, I know. And you say, well, how do you know? Well, I read my book and I just knew from the first page. No, that's not knowing, that's believing. It's a different thing, And this can be demonstrated very simply in that with the major belief systems in the world, say the two largest these days, Christianity and Islam, have many teachings that are incompatible. Therefore, Christians must surely accept that there are millions and millions of Muslims who are absolutely convinced they know things that Christians would assert they don't know, that they're deluded. And Muslims would simply also have to assert that Christians so-called know or believe things which are not true. So this is not a controversial statement that that sense of absolute certainty is not a proof that what you're certain about is actually true. Human beings can be absolutely 100% convinced in things which are not true. And for this reason, we take that sense of certainty as a mental state and we say, it's not sure. So then where would we stand on rebirth? Well, we stand on I don't actually know, but I have a strong conviction in rebirth based on, firstly, the Buddha's words in the Tipitaka, secondly, the past life memories of advanced meditators, thirdly, the spontaneous past life memories of children throughout the world, fourth, memories of people under hypnosis. So together, the evidence in the suttas and from past life memories of meditators, children, and those under hypnosis provide basis for conviction. But the Buddha gave us a very beautiful word, and it's Satchanuraka, and that means caring for the truth. So the Buddha says, never claim to know the truth when you simply have a strong, reasoned faith or conviction in the truth. Never jump that gap. Never go too far and say, because it makes so much sense to me, it seems so reasonable, it seems, therefore it's true. And this is the Buddhist attitude to religious teachings. We're putting them to the test, but we acknowledge that as so far we have not proved beyond any doubt that those teachings are true, and the Buddha doesn't want us to. He wants us to keep that questioning, seeking mind. Let me get back to translation again. This is the way I talk. I just sort of follow wherever it takes me. So one of Ajahn Chah's most well-known teachings is, when you feel really diligent and really full of faith and inspiration, then practice. And when you feel really lazy and low and discouraged and depressed, then practice. Okay. So one of the values of living in a monastery, of course, is that pretty much is a given. The bell goes at 3 a.m. and whether you feel enthusiastic or not, you get up, and that conforming to the schedule is a way of cutting through that tendency of I practice when I'm encouraged and inspired, and I don't when I'm not, because in that way you never really translate your initial inspiration into a real authentic experience of Buddha's teachings, and the benefit from them never really arises. The most important factor, I would say, is consistency. And again, Luang Por Chah, this is something that I loved about him so much when I was first there. His ability to tell stories that he told many times before without any kind of self-conscious. When you tell stories and you feel a little bit embarrassed, maybe someone said, well, excuse me if you've heard this one before, but I want to tell this again. So you sort of, and you're worried that people sort of be a little bit bored. And I remember I told a story once and somebody said, yeah, it was a really nice story, but I think I preferred it in the book, so or on YouTube or something like that. So anyway, Ajahn Chah would tell a story, and like every time he told it was like the first time, and you could see he enjoyed it so much. So one of his, and he likes stories where there's some kind of, action involved. So another story is about how we're always looking for the causes of suffering outside of ourselves when we're creating it ourselves. And he has a story of the mangy dog, so the mangy dog sits down and then he do all these sort of scratching movements, so this is a really, this is no place is no good, it's just making me itch. And he goes somewhere else and he's scratching and he's constantly thinking it's because of the place, but actually it's because of the mange. In other words, it's not because of the people, the situation, it's because of your thinking, your attitude, your own mental state. So the story I wanted to tell you, the illustration he gave, which I think is really graphic and memorable, is of someone rubbing two sticks together to make fire. So if you think about it, the kinds of work that we do in our life, there's one we can divide maybe into two kinds. So one is like mowing the lawn. Okay, you can be mowing the lawn, you get a bit hot, sweaty, sit down in the shade, have a cool drink, relax, and then carry on with mowing the lawn. So this is a kind of a job where you can stop and start and accumulate the benefits until eventually you finish the lawn, or you finish the job, or you finish the painting, or the essay, or whatever it might be. But then there's the other kind of work, exemplified by rubbing two sticks together to make fire. So so people rubbing sticks together, and it's like, is it getting warmer? Or maybe I'll just put them down, just have a bit of a rest, and then I'll carry on a bit later on. And so you pick the sticks up and you start again. And of course, you never create the heat in the sticks that you need, the critical temperature to create fire, because you're stopping and starting and stopping and starting, and you're assuming that it's the same kind of work as mowing the lawn. But you can't. Every time you stop, you start, and you're starting all over again. And this is what happens in Dhamma practice. People go on a retreat. It's like they're rubbing the sticks like this for 7 days or 10 days, and then they'll put them down for a week, and then pick them up again, and that's this city, these people, and start to blame the situation. But you've lost that consistency. So even if you're not practicing for very long, not in formal practice as very long, as at least keep it going, even if it's not for very long. Don't let it fall to the wayside altogether, because it's not something that you can just pick up again and carry on from where you left off. And this is, I think, absolutely key to this translation of faith into conduct, and from conduct into results. Consistency, and the practice of meditation is one in which we're learning about the mind in a very direct way. So like a wrong translation here, to use this extended metaphor, is when we apply worldly standards and worldly models to meditation. So in the world, you do something in order to get a result, and that's one of the most unwise and toxic ways of approaching meditation. People say, "Oh, I can't meditate. I tried it, can't do it. No good, hopeless." I say, "Well, what do you mean?" Say, "Well, my mind goes all over the place. The moment I sit, it's just thinking of this and thinking of that. So I just gave up." I said, "Well, no. I mean, this is the whole point. The only way that you can really train the mind is you have to understand the workings of the mind. And the only way that you can find a sustainable peace of mind is by understanding the process, and the mechanics of all the things that are not peaceful in your mind. You can't just sort of bypass these things." So when you give your mind like a single job to do, just one thing, mind goes crazy because it's addicted to having lots of things going on. It's addicted to stimulation. It's addicted to variety. It's addicted to the ups and the downs, and you're not feeding it anymore, and you have this immediate reaction, and that reaction is the point. You want that reaction. Because this is the work that you have to do. You're seeing that when you can't, when you're frustrated, when you have an object like the mind, the breath, then what is your usual default resistance? Is it in the form of fantasizing about things, or imagining memories, or imagining pleasant situations in the future? So are you taking memory or thought as your refuge, or are you getting caught up in resentments and negativity and ill will of various kinds towards yourself or to others or to the meditation object itself? Or does your mind get very dull and sleepy and bored? Or does it just go rushing around like a monkey? Or do you start thinking, maybe this isn't the right technique for me, or maybe I should try that, or maybe I should try Tai Chi, maybe that would be a bit better for me, a bit more kind of movement, and it's very mindful as well. Or I could do, I don't know, all the different things that you can do. There's always something else, basically, or the Burmese techniques, or the Sri Lankan, or this and that, and so this movement of the mind to doubt and to undermine your commitment to what you're doing. So people's minds work in different ways, and some hindrances tend to be more of a problem than others. But this is the work that you're doing. So to get away from the idea of meditation as a kind of relaxation technique, it's work, and it's really hard work, but it's very valuable work. And the rewards of it are incredible. But it is not something that comes easily, and you have to learn to be able to motivate yourself and to find a way of enjoying it and valuing it, even if it's tough. So seeing the big picture of what you're doing, and this also, I think, a point I'm very much like to make here is that this there's a translation from the inner to the outer, and from the outer to the inner, which go together and harmonize. So I think we're familiar with the idea. If you're developing thoughts of loving kindness, for instance, then we would hope that it would start to manifest in the way that you relate to the people around you. So the loving thoughts you're developing, they're becoming more habitual to you, and they express themselves. So there's a translation from this inner purity of heart to external expressions through body and speech. But there is also a movement the other way. So by keeping precepts, then we affect our inner world. So, for instance, the first precept, if we're very consistent with that and very scrupulous, even small creatures that we may find frightening or disgusting, irritating, and so on, that under no circumstances do we hurt or harm those beings. And that means that every time the intention to harm arises, it is not gratified. And over the course of time, if a particular intention is not expressed verbally or physically or verbally, it starts to wither. It's like a muscle that you don't use. Say you're bedridden for some reason, and the muscles in your legs start to atrophy because you're not using them anymore. So if every time the desire, the intention, the habit to swat a mosquito, for instance, is recognized and not acted upon, then that intention will wither and arise less and less frequently. And when that intention to hurt and to harm becomes less and less prominent, then thoughts of loving kindness will replace them. So this is the way that the external practice conditions internal mental states through refraining from acting upon unwholesome intentions. So keeping precepts is a very important mindfulness practice. So if most of us, we're working a lot of life, we just inevitably we're on automatic pilot. We can't give attention to everything that's going on all the time. So we're often the slave of our habits. So let's say you have a habit to kill mosquitoes. I'm sure you don't, but let's just imagine for the sake of argument. And let's say this case where a mosquito is biting you and there's that itch and that pain, and then you catch yourself. Now that's such an interesting moment. What's really happening there? So what happens is that mindfulness arises. Mindfulness of the first precept. So the precepts are not commandments, or these are pegs for mindfulness. These are the most basic objects of mindfulness in daily life, and they're the most important because you lose mindfulness in other areas, and maybe it causes some problems and some mental distress and some difficulties with the people around you. But it's recoverable. It's not the end of the world. But if you consistently break the 5 precepts, you are seriously compromising your well-being, not only in this life, but in future lives. So that's why it's so important to make these the objects of your mindfulness. And out of the more supportive atmosphere of a monastery or a meditation center or a Dhamma center, the precepts are what give you they're your compass. They're the things that keep you on track more than anything else. So there's so much going on to be mindful moment by moment of body and mind and mental states. Very, very difficult. And that's something to aspire to. But what is the absolute, non-negotiable factor is mindfulness of precepts, mindfulness of the 5 precepts. Just a point here also is that talking about precepts and a moment ago I said they're not commandments. We don't believe in a deity who rewards and punishes us. But we start off as Buddhists with a simple acknowledgement that the most basic human need is the sense of safety. No matter what access you have to Buddhist teachings, and you have ability, you can go and visit great Buddhist teachers and receive teachings and transmissions from them. If in your life you don't feel safe, or if you don't feel that your children are safe or your loved ones are safe, it's almost impossible to have the foundation for any consistent progress in Dhamma. So we, all of us, and this is not just the Buddhists or human beings, we need to feel safe. So this is the foundation of Buddhist morality. So the question we ask is, given that we all have this fundamental need to feel safe, how can we live together in such a way as to promote this feeling of safety? And the Buddha's answer is the 5 precepts. And it's based upon simple, again, this observation of human nature, that we cannot, as an act of will, renounce negative emotions. You cannot listen to an inspiring talk on the Brahma Viharas, on loving kindness, compassion, and wow, yeah, that's it. I'm never, ever going to get angry with anybody ever again. It's just so gross, and it's just so, I'm just going to radiate thoughts of kindness and forgiveness wherever I go. Yeah, I mean, it sounds nice, but you can't do that, can you? It's just not possible. But what you can do is to say, yeah, I'm working on anger. I need to develop mindfulness and patience and loving kindness and insight. But that's long haul. That's life work. But what I can do right from today, from right now, is to proclaim to all the people around me, my family and the people around me, is even though sometimes I get angry, I lose my temper, and I get irritated and jealous, and so I will never abuse you physically or verbally under any circumstances. Now, if someone who you live with in your family, in your community, says that, how do you feel? Wow, you feel safe. Huh? So this is why the precepts are an offering. The Buddha called them Mahadana, great dana. You give the gift of safety to the people around you. So you're not going from this very high, overly idealistic, you slap this cheek and you give me this, I'll give you this cheek, or, I love you, and, I forgive you, and it's dishonest, it's not true, and it's not authentic, and it's just too idealistic. But the vow and the intention not to abuse physically or verbally, that's doable. And we can do that. Any of us can do that. It's tough, and sometimes, temptations and pressures are strong, but at the end of the day, it's doable. And we should say that, I still feel greedy and acquisitive, and I have so many things that I want, and I see things that you have, and sometimes I feel like, if I only had that, I'd be happy. But I will never take anything of yours that doesn't belong to me. When you're in a relationship, then you can tell your spouse, I still, I have sexual desires. I'm a normal human being, not enlightened human being. Sometimes I see members of the opposite sex, and I feel some sexual desires. I feel some attraction. I feel some liking, and this is just part of being a human being. But I would never act upon those feelings. I will never speak. I will never communicate with someone, try to create connections because of those feelings. So how do you feel safe? You can relax, can't you? Because you're not expecting, this kind of, I only have eyes for you. No other woman has any. Yeah. I mean, maybe when you first fall in love, it's true, but it doesn't last. I hope you don't think it's overly cynical of you, but that, if you're an unenlightened human being with a healthy body, you're going to have physical desires, and you can't just as an act of will restrict them to one person. But what you can do is restrict your actions and your speech. And you say, this is the one person in my life. I make this commitment to you, and I will never act and speak behind your back in a way that would make you feel jealous or unhappy. And then with your use, and you can say to other people, I would never try and take your girlfriend away from you or your spouse away from you. I would never act upon that way. So again, it's not way head up in the clouds, so how I'm a Buddhist now, I don't think like that anymore. I'm saying, but you're taking your stand on sila. And you don't, when we sometimes the temptation to lie are very strong, because if we don't lie, then maybe people will, it'll be embarrassing. Maybe people will lose a little bit of respect for us, a little bit of affection for us, and absolutely ultimate fear that somebody would abandon us. And but you say, I won't lie to you, even about small matters. And often the thing comes up here, what about white lies? So somebody says to you, I cut my hair, what do you think? And you said, is it nice? Or is it delicious? And, all these sort of everyday things where, you don't have a malicious intent, quite the opposite. You don't hurt somebody's feelings. But the mistake here is to assume that you have two choices. Your choice is tell the truth and hurt someone's feelings, or lie and keep them happy. But there's no practice there, there's no effort, there's no wisdom. So the wisdom is, how can I speak in such a way as, one, to preserve the truth, and two, to preserve that person's feelings. And so that's where the effort, that's how you practice Dhamma in daily life. You're finding that middle way. Really give some thought about finding ways of. Sometimes it can just be a distraction. It doesn't mean you can't just sort of change the subject or be a bit distracting or say something more kind of ambiguous. But you're avoiding that, saying something that you do not believe to be true, no matter what the result may be. So if you're giving this gift of safety to the people around you, you're giving this wonderful gift. I'm not going to abuse you physically or verbally. I'm not going to steal from you. I'm not going to cheat on you. I'm not going to lie to you. But if I have a few drinks, I'm not so sure whether I'll be able to do that or not. I'll try, but then it doesn't work anymore. The whole thing loses its power and its purity and its integrity. And so this we make this. I won't consume any drug, whether it's a legal drug or an illegal drug, that will compromise my ability to live up to these commitments to you and to my and to family and community. And so this is our understanding of morality. It's based upon these ideas of creating the best possible community that families and communities, and by that I mean one in which we are living as good friends and not reinforcing each other's negativity or each other's defilements, but helping and strengthening each other's good qualities and helping each other to overcome defilements, and creating an atmosphere and creating a way of living together which is most conducive to growth in Dhamma for all involved. So morality and wisdom is connected with the other elements of the path of the samadhi and panya. So here, just a reminder, this is I think obvious point, but sometimes misunderstood. The word samadhi in the Eightfold Path, sama samadhi, in the text it's defined in terms of jhana. But in the Threefold Training, which is the like abbreviation of the 8 reduced to 3, the word samadhi there does not refer to jhana. It does not refer to meditation. It refers to the whole area of abandonment and cultivation of unwholesome and wholesome dhammas. It's that whole inner area of emotions, dealing with preventing negative emotions from arising, dealing skillfully with negative emotions that have arisen, instilling positive emotions and taking care and further developing wholesome. It's a lot wider. So samadhi here is an umbrella term. It's not to be defined narrowly as meditation. So it's sila and the training of the heart, which is given the title of samadhi, and wisdom development. And so to keep precepts well in the way that I've been talking, first of all, you need the wisdom faculty. You have to see the value of it, and you have to see the the suffering inherent in not keeping each one of those precepts. You have to see for 1 to 5, everyone, exactly what is the value and what is the of keeping it, and what is the danger and the drawback and the suffering involved in not keeping it. So this is a wisdom practice. Then to keep precepts well, you need patience, you need mindfulness, you need contentment, you need loving kindness. All these things strengthen the precepts. So when precepts or sila is to the fore, samadhi and panya are the supporting factors. When samadhi, the training of the heart, is at the forefront, then precepts and the wisdom are the supporting factors. When wisdom is to the fore, whether it's on the level of wise reflection or even vipassana, then precepts and sila and samadhi are the supporting factor. So at any one time there are always those three together. It's simply that one is taking the burden and one is the chief actor at that particular time. And this is the practice that we're developing. So it's a holistic practice. It's not one and then the other, but that there should be representatives and elements of each of those three areas of the practice of conduct and speech, education of conduct and speech, education of the heart, and education of understanding. And this is how we apply or translate the teachings into our daily life. So I've been talking for quite a long time now, so I think that's probably enough for the talk this morning. So I think that we tend to look on sitting meditation and walking meditation as like the real practice, and that's not always such a helpful way of looking at it. And so my advice is to look at your practice in terms of the 4 right efforts, which are found in the in right effort, the 6 of the 8 elements of the Eightfold Path. So let's say when you're meditating, exactly what are you doing? And what is the nature of your effort? Well, first of all, let's say if your meditation object is the breath, then you are trying to focus on the breath in such a way that hindrances will not come into your mind. So this is the first of the 4 aspects of right effort. The effort to prevent the arising of as yet unarisen, unwholesome dhammas. So this is what you're doing when you're meditating on the breath. Now, it's very difficult to do that, and it's quite likely that a hindrance will arise, in which case you apply the second aspect of the 4 right efforts, which is the effort to abandon the arisen, unwholesome Dhamma. Now, at the same time, you are seeking to introduce into the mind the bojjhangas, or the enlightenment factors, beginning with mindfulness. So you things like mindfulness, a balance of effort and a relaxation, and contentment with the breath, and so on. So you're introducing into your mind various wholesome dhammas. So you're introducing as yet unarisen wholesome dhammas into the mind. Now, when these wholesome dhammas have arisen, you see, then you're seeking to sustain them and to further develop them, which is the 4th aspect of right effort. So I would say one way of articulating exactly what it is you're doing when you're meditating, whatever technique or whatever school you're following, that it should conform to these right efforts. Now, in daily life, how do you practice, as you say, to prevent the sticks from going cold? Well, if you're looking in terms of, I should sit more, and I just don't have so much time to sit because of the kids, because of work, because of this, because of that, get very frustrated. But if you start off with, okay, in this morning or in this period, what are the kinds of hindrances? What are the kinds of defilements that are likely to arise? And then so your effort is to prevent the arising of those unarisen mental states. And the example I might give is maybe you don't get so much traffic here and everybody's very kind of disciplined, but in a city like Bangkok, you say, so it's people get very upset with the sloppy and selfish drivers. So this is your goal. I mean, to drive to work without allowing my mind to give rise to this unarisen, unwholesome Dhamma of irritation. And in the case that irritation or anger should arise, then I would apply this or that antidote. Or I'm driving to work. What are the wholesome qualities I could develop? So driving in traffic is a quite good time for developing metta meditation. Or sometimes people like to put on a Dhamma Talk on their CD player or whatever. So your effort is focused in any particular part of the day on these 4 areas of preventing the arising of unwholesome dhammas, eliminating those that haven't, creating and cultivating the wholesome dhammas, and further developing those that are already arisen. So in a meeting, if you're in a meeting, you can't just sit there like watching your in-breath and out-breath, you'll get the sack. So you might be able to respond to the sack with great equanimity more than if you hadn't, but it probably wouldn't be a very wise idea. So it's more sense, what should be my practice in a meeting in terms of wholesome and unwholesome dhammas? So what are the kind of defilements? So boredom, again, irritation when people start talking longer than they're supposed to talk and they go off topic, and so this is something I can work on. Do I give the same kind of respectful attention to everyone, or do I dismiss certain people that I don't like or I don't look up to? And how can I listen to everyone with that same level of attention? And how can I be mindful throughout this? Can I develop patience? And if it's the time for me to speak, do I know the right time and the right place to speak? Can I marshal my arguments well? And so there are all kinds, we can make these wholesome, unwholesome, kusala dhamma, akusala dhamma projects in our daily life. And then when you have some free time standing in a lift, you don't have to look in the mirror, you know what you look like already, and use those few minutes to be with your breath, or walking from a building to your car, short periods of time. But you notice that, like stress, that in most working day life, it's not that there are major stressful incidents. Once in a while, something really stressful occurs. But generally what it is, it's just a gradual accumulation of minor stresses throughout the day. So the time you finish, you're exhausted, 5 o'clock at night or something. But if you can introduce these very short 30-second, 60-second periods of meditation, you don't have to sit for 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, but just to come back to your body and your mind, re-establish your breathing, let go of the physical tension, let go of the mental stress, start again. So it's that finding those short periods of time, no matter how busy your life is, I would say you still, do have there's just a minute here and a minute there. And so when you're stressed out in front of your computer, instead of checking your WeChat or your Line or something, or going onto your favorite website, just go watch your breath for a minute. It's not going to affect your work very badly, and much better than finding some other kind of distraction. So making this chunking is some of you may be familiar with this word, like taking large jobs and chunking, make smaller, manageable chunks. So make chunks out of your day, from when you get up to when you go to work, the way to work, from beginning of work to midday, the midday rest, the afternoon, the evening, and make each of these like a discrete period when you can put some fresh effort into the practice. So that's my idea about consistency. Well, it's the action itself, not the result, which is wholesome or unwholesome. Okay, so the wholesome or unwholesome nature is determined by your intention and your mental state when you act. But you could have a very wholesome intention, but maybe have not such a good result, or you could have an unwholesome intention and have a beneficial result in short term. Yeah, you can't be sure about that. Like if you were living with a group of psychopaths, and then you were you tried to be kind, and they would all criticize you, wouldn't get a very good result from that. And that's maybe not a good example, but whether or not your action has a positive result is conditioned by all kinds of things outside your control. So you should try to be clear in your mind as to over what area you have some control. But this is where people get very stressed out, because you try to control things which are outside your control. So recognize, like if you're working hard, on a project, you could put so much hard work into something, but then your colleague makes a mistake, and overall, it's a big problem. And though you personally did very well, but still, because you're part of a larger group, then the overall result is not so good. So that's why we can't say, well, because I did this, therefore I should get that result. But we take our refuge is, I did the best I could, and then we have to be content with that. Well,
like this kind of world,
wait.
Like family and society and working and career and those things.
Yeah, I mean that's the people who use this word very, very glibly don't really know what they're talking about, do they? I mean, like the real world is this body and this mind. When you meditate, that's when you get in touch with the real world. What people are talking about is an idea or a concept. Or suppose someone was to say to you, you live in Singapore, you don't live in the real world. You need to go to Africa or slums of Calcutta so you really know the real world. You can always use that as an argument, I went to live for years in the slums of Calcutta, helping the people there, and they say, okay, so what have you done for global warming? Yeah. You can always, there's always something you haven't done, and so you don't have to justify yourself in that way. And And people say, the real world. Well, how real is that? You say, money is real. Well, is it really? How is it that you have this, like a panic, so the stock exchange goes down, everyone panics, and you have money which was worth so much today, and now it's worth so much less. So what was the difference? Yeah, people had faith in that money yesterday, and they don't have faith today. So the whole economic system is based upon faith and trust. And these are mental states. They're not sort of, this idea that the material world is more real than the inner world, that's a philosophical position. So when people say, the real world, you say, well, that's a really interesting philosophy you have there. I'd really like to hear what you have to say about from what?
Running away from society.
Yeah, you see, but this is such a foolish way of talking. So one of the great European thinkers and sages was a man called Pascal, and he wrote a book called Pensées, or Thoughts. And one of his thoughts and reflections in this book is that all of man's problems, or all of humanity's problems, spring from the fact that he's unable to be alone with himself in a room. So I have a challenge for anyone who thinks they know what the real world is. I say, go into a room, for a whole day, without any books, any iPad, any telephone, any devices, any kind of entertainment, and you're not allowed to go to sleep, and you just have to be awake in a room by yourself for 12 hours. And you come out and you tell me what it was like. Yeah. And, people go up the wall in 20 minutes or 30 minutes. So this is their real, is this not the real world, So the real world for them is a real world of distraction. And they're living in the fantasy world, but they're able to live in it by giving it this stamp of, this is the real world, Like anybody who goes to stay in a monastery would know that, if your intention is to run away from things, you won't last 5 minutes in a monastery. Someone who's going to a monastery is someone who's actually willing to face up to the real world, instead of just, what happens, all these people in the real world, what happens when people are on an aeroplane, So, you've got something to read, got something to eat, got something to watch. You watch what you're going to watch, you ate what you're going to eat, you read what you're going to. What do people do? They fall asleep. People don't have inner resources to live, to be a human being in this world without distractions. It's almost impossible for normal people. This is absolutely stunning, but it's so normal whenever you think about it. Yeah. So the moment you don't have any kind of stimulation, you fall asleep. Yeah. So this for me is like a puppet, You're alive and you're bright because of drugs and stimulation and sights and sounds, but the moment the level of stimulation drops, you fall asleep. You don't want to be present anymore. You can't handle it. This is the real world. This is,
Maybe you can just take one last question. So, okay.
Like the... yeah, hopefully. I'm hesitating a little because I can't think of any concrete examples that I can think of where someone who was a stream enterer has chosen death rather than break a precept. So I can't give absolute unqualified assent to this, but the point about a stream enterer, one thing you can say is that it's impossible for a stream enterer to adopt the teachings of another religion, because once you've seen clearly the nature of reality, then there's no way that you can turn your back on the teachings of the Buddha. But and so the intention to break precepts doesn't arise. But I'm trying to think myself. You know, somebody, if somebody was okay, so let's say somebody comes in and they just had their hair cut, okay, and they're very insecure about it, and they say, "Does it look nice?" Okay, and it doesn't look nice, okay, and then their husband comes in, and he's like one of these American NRA psychopaths, and he's got a machine gun, and he says, "If you tell my wife her hair doesn't look nice, I'm going to machine gun everyone in this room." So I'm thinking, like, if I was a Sotapanna or whatever level of attainment, I'm thinking of myself, you know, whether or not I would say, yeah, say. But you know, the thing is, you can always get round these things if you're smart enough. I tell you a story, okay? This is. We have time for a story.
We have time.
So this is a story of a priest in America, and he's got this boys' club, and the main sponsors of this boys' club are these two brothers who are gangsters. Okay, so they try to assuage their guilt by giving money to the boys' club, and the priest takes this money. And then the elder brother, I think it's the other one, either one, gets killed, okay? And so it's a funeral. So the night before the funeral, the other brother comes round and says, "When you give the eulogy tomorrow, I want you to tell everybody that my brother was a saint." Okay? And if you don't, that's the end of all the financial support for the boys' club. You know, and all these boys are going to be out on the street and all the temptation. And so this is the dilemma. You know, because this man was, you know, he's a gangster and he's done all kinds of terrible things. And the priest is put on the spot. You've got to say he was a saint. So the next morning he gets up. They have the church service, the funeral, and there's a coffin there, and all the mourners. And so he gives his eulogy, and he says, James, or whoever he is, this man who passed away, you know, he was a gangster, you know, and he killed, and he robbed, and he hurt, and he oppressed, and he did all these terrible things. But compared to his brother, he's a saint. You see, so this is, you know, you can. Okay, that's my story.